Hey everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the future race at Aqueduct on Saturday. Race 8 is the Jerome Stakes for the 3-year-olds, going 1 mile, kicking off that New York route to the Kentucky Derby that will culminate later this spring in the Wood Memorial. This one just offering 10 Kentucky Derby qualifying points to the winner. Before we get into the field for this race, though, be reminded that it's time for you to refresh that DRF Formulator subscription or get some Timeform USPPs. Do it this week and take advantage of our New Year's sale, 15% off. Just use that coupon code NY2025 when you shop at shop.drf.com. Well, Mike, we got a field of 8 runners signed on for this Jerome, and not the strongest field in terms of horses with stakes credentials coming in. I mean, I suppose Studlydoright is kind of the star of this race, having won a couple stakes on the New York circuit this year, winning the Tremont as a 2-year-old early in the summer, and then, the Nashua most recently in November. But he's a horse that has kind of been up and down recently, so not sure how trustworthy he is coming into this race. And some others have some upside, but they all are horses that are going to have to just get a little faster and prove it at this level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, if you're going to call Studlydoright the star of this race, that about says it all. I mean, he sort of is what he is. I'm not knocking him. And in a lot of ways, he's probably the horse to beat here. It just feels like this is the kind of race where you don't want to settle for anybody necessarily at a short price. And maybe if you can, look around and see if you can make a case for somebody else. There's just not that much to hold on to, I didn't think, in this race.
I did peg the number 8 mcafee as the slight morning line favorite over Studlydoright, a horse who has shown potential in his first couple starts. We'll see if he can take that step forward in the speed figure department in this Jerome. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this race, and no shortage of speed signed on in this one, Mike. I mean, predicting a fast pace by Timeform US, and I see 4 horses towards the front end that all want to be either leading or contesting the pace to have their best chance, particularly the 2 drawn down towards the inside who aren't shown on the front end, but you think breaking from their inside draws have to show initiative. Enduring Spirit, who maybe looks a little overmatched, but does have plenty of sprint speed, and especially the number 2, Manetti, who has shown a lot of early speed in some synthetic races up at Woodbine.
Yeah, I did see a fast pace developing in this race. I guess we'll see how it all plays out with these horses. But I thought there were a couple of horses who could be interesting in this race, maybe even at fair prices. But they are horses who I think want to be forward, and this pace could be fast.
Let's go through this field in post-position order, beginning with that number 1, Enduring Spirit, a horse who does figure to go forward in the early stages from his rail draw. Just a big question mark surrounding whether or not he can sustain his speed at this level and also going the 1 mile distance, because his only victory and really his only redeeming effort came going 5 furlongs at Churchill Downs all the way back in May of this year, and a horse that just hasn't really shown much finishing ability in 3 subsequent starts, so coming in with a lot to prove.
Yeah, he's just hard to like, especially based off those 3 most recent starts. He just got loose when he broke his maiden. He was the only horse in that field, too, who had a prior race. He was facing all first-time starters in there, and he got the jump on them. I mean, listen, there's no way to really have a lot of faith in this horse in here, especially with all the speed to his outside. But I guess, David, if you're a speed figure guy, and this horse is a huge price in here, save the 2 Studlydoright stakes wins, and then I think 1 race from Cyclone State. That's 76 he earned. It's faster than everybody else in the field.
The number 2 is Manetti, who will be trying dirt for the first time after 3 all-weather starts up at Woodbine. And he's won 2 of 3 of those races. But, Mike, the 2 victories did come going 6 furlongs, and he was kind of shortening stride at the end of each of those races. And then I look at the 1 7-furlong try on the display where he was stalking the pace, got away with some very moderate fractions, and then just totally threw in the towel at the quarter pole with no finish whatsoever that day. So the way this horse is finishing off his shorter races doesn't exactly give me confidence that he's crying out for a mile either.
Yeah, that was my main problem with him too. I like some of his races up in Woodbine. I do think this horse actually has some ability, but when you watch his races, especially in the late stages, you have to be very, very concerned about this horse stretching out to a mile, because he just does not finish strong in any of his races.
Number three is I Can, one of two Rick Dutrow trainees in this race. He'll likely be the bigger price of those of that duo. A horse who did take a big step forward when he came to this circuit at Naira last time, stepping up against winners for the first time off just an easy and slow maiden victory at Horseshoe Indianapolis, but ran much better in that Aqueduct 1 mile allowance race. Probably not facing the toughest field that day and couldn't catch Cyclone State, who's back in here, but he at least was finishing like a horse that had no problem getting the mile, and he's relatively lightly raced. He's improved quite a bit with each subsequent start, so maybe he's got another move forward in him.
I agree with you. Even his maiden win 2 starts back. I know it was an off the turf race at Indiana. He only got a 53 buyer for it. He smashed that field with a pretty good finish, I thought. And then he came up here, and I thought he ran well last time. He got off to a terrible start in that race. I did like the way he kept after Cyclone State through the stretch. This horse moved forward last time. I think he can move forward again.
The number 4 is Omaha, a horse that is going to appreciate any pace that develops in this race because he does not have much early speed at all. But he can finish, and we saw that in his most recent start at Laurel, where he got plenty of pace to close into. I mean, they went 23 for the opening quarter, which is really moving, going the mile and a 16th distance for the 2-year-olds. When you get a final time of 146 and 1, they really did slow down in the late stages. And I think that's why Omaha was able to make this visually impressive move. I mean, you can kind of see coming to the stretch of this race, he's not running that fast, but he's running faster than everybody else. He's kind of coming to a stop at the end. Clearly distance, no problem with this guy, but he's one that's actually turning back because all of his prior starts have come around 2 turns, and now he's trying 1 turn for the first time.
Yeah, he's hoping that pace projector is correct, though, that they're just going to go out blazing it in front of him and give him something to come running after, as he did last time. Listen, you're not worried about distance with this horse. You're worried about how far away he's going to be early, and then whether he can pick up what seems like, I mean, this isn't the strongest field in the world, but he's facing some better horses here.
The number 5 is Georgia Magic, a horse that was a winner on debut. He was part of an entry that day. They together went off at 6-5. I think this is the horse that was taking a lot of money in that entry. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that debut race, and he contests the pace along the inside every step of the way, was pressured right up until the quarter pole, is able to put that pace foe away, get some challenges from the outside, and is able to stay on pretty well to the wire to maintain his advantage, winning that race by about 1.5 lengths at the end. Mike, he only got a 49 buyer for this effort, but I do wonder if there's a little more to this race than meets the eye, because the field just felt better than the number the race was assigned. And you look at some of the runbacks out of the race, the runner-up came back at his next start, improved 18 buyer points. The third place finisher came back at his next start, improved 22 buyer points. So I kind of view that race as maybe one that should have a buyer in like the high 60s. That doesn't exactly make him, so appealing in this race, but I mean, he is bred to stretch out by good magic out of a flatter mare. We'll see if he can take a step forward here, because I think he's better than he looks on paper.
I agree. I'm taking the 49 buyer with a big grain of salt there for the debut, especially because when you go back, especially David, and watch the full replay, I mean, they had to ask this horse a little bit to make the lead in there, but he did, and he just took pressure on the lead the entire way. That race was much faster early and then slower late, but he was still holding off all the horses who had the better trips in that race that were coming after him. So I gave him extra credit for that as well. Listen, it's not going to be easy for him to step right up into a race like this and get a mile with some other speeds, surrounding him in here. But this horse ran better than it looks first time out.
Number 6 is Cyclone State, who kind of completes that quartet of horses that wants to be forwardly placed in the early stages. We'll take a look at his most recent start when he was an allowance winner over I Can, who we already mentioned, being that other Rick Dutrow contender in the race. That runner is going to close into second at the end, and Cyclone State just kind of able to control this race early and kick away in the stretch. He did go off at 3-10 odds this day, but that was only because the horse that would have probably been close to 3-10, Uncle Jim, who's finishing third in this race, had to run for purse money only due to his entry rate being scratched. So the race, I thought, looked a little tougher on the way in than it turned out to be, with Uncle Jim kind of not taking that step forward that you might have expected. And Cyclone State was just able to control the race up front, got a very favorable pace scenario when he broke his maiden 2 back. So I feel like this horse has gotten good trips, and he could find himself in a more difficult position this time.
That worried me more than anything else, also, David. I mean, I actually feel like this horse has run pretty well in all of his dirt starts. But the two wins, those last two starts, he just had such soft trips. It makes me wonder how much he's actually improved off of the potential that he showed early on. I don't know. I'm not going to be surprised when he's really, really competitive in here with or without the early lead. But I do want to wait and see what kind of price he is, because he's got a couple of recent wins. People are probably going to bet this horse at least a little bit in here, and I wouldn't want too short a price on him.
Number 7 is Studlydoright, who, as I mentioned at the top, is clearly the most accomplished horse coming into this race. He's a 2-time stakes winner who did win the Nashua going this distance over this course back in early November and earned an 86 buyer that day, which kind of does make him the horse to beat in this race. I will say the race kind of does stick out in his past performances, as does that Tremont earlier in the summer, because he kind of regressed and turned into a horse that wasn't able to run up to that level in the intervening months, and then this Nashua kind of came out of nowhere. He did get a very good trip that day, and I personally felt watching the race on November 2nd, especially early in the day, like being on the rail was a big advantage, and Studlydoright did get a ground-saving trip to victory in that Nashua. I will say his trainer, and take trainer quotes for whatever you think they're worth, but the trainer did make note in a race advance for this that he wasn't able to train him the way he wanted to coming into the Remsen because they had many training days canceled due to a track condition issue at Laurel, where he was stabled between the Nashua and the Remsen. So maybe that was an excuse last time, also trying the 9 furlongs for the first time. This horse is a little inconsistent and hard to trust, but he's clearly capable on his best day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really add anything to that, David. I mean, he's easy to make a case for in here. The pace projector probably looks pretty good to him too, because he'll just sort of sit off the leaders and make a run. Listen, we'll see how they want to bet in the race. He's got to take money in here. I'm not a big fan of his. I liked a couple of his races early on. I can't say that I've necessarily been impressed with anything he's done recently, and that includes the Nashua. 2 starts back, he got the job done in there. I personally, if he just shows up here and runs his Nashua, David, I just don't think he's going to win this race. But we'll see. Maybe he's in another really good spot here. You can be lenient for the Remsen from a lot of different ways. I guess the trainer quote included. He was terrible in that race.
The number 8 is McAfee, and coming down a little bit of a limb, making this horse the morning line favorite. I just feel like this is where a lot of people might land in this race, just given the pace scenario that we talked about and the fact that this horse looks like he's kind of just warming up to what he might ultimately turn out to be. I mean, he obviously showed a lot of potential on debut, going the 6 furlong distance, where he got off to a sluggish start, was towards the back of the pack early, but once he got rolling around the far turn, I mean, he just looped that field and mowed them down in the stretch, going away at the end like a horse that was going to love some added distance. He got that last time, stretching out to the mile in a starter allowance race at Churchill Downs, and did everything but win that race because he traveled well in behind horses, kind of needed a path and upper stretch, dove down towards the inside, got put in tight by a horse that was setting the pace and kind of drifting in through the lane, but battled back along the inside and just barely lost at the end to Optical. When I watch this horse run, Mike, he just looks like one that is going to appreciate whatever added distance he can get. He has this massive stride on him. It looks like he's taking 1 stride to every horse's 2 when they're coming through the lane. And on top of that, he does have some pedigree to be an okay horse, being a half brother to that likely horse of the year, Torpedo Anna.
Guess they got him while the getting was still good last September for 40,000. Listen, I saw the same things you did. He had that fast pace in front of him. In the career debut. I like the way he dealt with it, came with a big run to close that race down again. I think we sort of touched on his allowance race last time, because the horse that beat him is in the Smarty Jones there at Oakland. Listen, this horse I feel like was best in there, but he was just sort of forced to try to squeeze through on the rail all the way through. I mean, he had room, but it was always just a little bit tight. I like the way that he held his position in there and then just missed at the end. He's on the outside now. He's going to have some pace to come after in here. I think this horse is pretty dangerous in here.
Yeah, and it probably would be remiss of me not to mention that the Rick Dutcher barn has been winning about half the races that he enters in New York for the past couple months, so that's a positive as well with the number 8 McAfee. And we'll throw up our picks for this race, Mike, and I think we had a pretty similar view of this one. Just looks like McAfee fits this Jerome really well. As you were noting, if Studlydoright is the horse to beat, this didn't come up that tough of an affair, and while McAfee does have to get a little faster in the speed figure department, he looks like the kind of horse that probably does have that upside.
Yeah, we'll see. I will have to wait to see how they bet the race because listen, you made him 2-1 on the morning line, and I totally get that. He's supposed to take money in here. I don't think I'd bet him at that price. But I'm going to take him on top in here. I really don't like Studley Do Right. He feels like the other horse to me.
Yeah, I toyed around with putting the number 5 Georgia Magic higher because I do think there are things to like about his debut race. I just wish there wasn't so much speed in this race for him to deal with. So Mike and I both have the number 8 McAfee on top in the Jerome race 8 at Aqueduct on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.